Spring training, believe it or not. Up next on Fantasy Baseball Today Express. Welcome into FBT Express on Wednesday, February 25th. I am Frank Stampfl, joined by Chris Towers. Let's do a little spring training, believe it or not. We've got some statements here, some things that are going on lately, and let's discuss. Up first, where Brandon Woodruff might not be ready for opening day, believe it or not.
So this is a tough one because there was this quote. He made his first bullpen session on Monday, and afterwards he said, "It's fair to say I'm a touch behind the other guys and that I'm focused less on getting ready for opening day and more on being available at the end of the year when it matters most." And this is an example of the limitations of the kind of aggregation economy in sports, because I don't actually think there's much risk of Brandon Woodruff not being ready for opening day. And some reporting on Tuesday indicates that he is, in fact, expected to be ready for opening day. The concern for me is just that he's probably priced a little too high for someone who does have significant injury risk. You know, he missed basically 2 seasons with shoulder injuries that led to surgery. His return from that shoulder surgery last season was an arduous process, to say the least. He had many fits and starts, ending with a lat injury that ended his season. He's, by all accounts, healthy right now. But when you're talking about, 122 ADP in the month of February, I think that's probably a little too high for Brandon Woodruff. So it's like, I don't believe the specific question of whether he'll be ready for opening day. I think he should be, or if not, shortly after. But I agree with I believe the general thrust, which is, hey, there is something to be worried about in Brandon Woodruff's profile, even if it's not necessarily a concern right now. It's more, can he get through the season?
We know that Edwin Uceta is dealing with a cranky shoulder right now. I believe he had a cortisone injection in there. Not sure if he'll be ready for opening day, so we'll see on that. But as a result, Griffin Jax might get some helium. So believe it or not, Griffin Jax should be pushed up draft boards.
A little bit, but I think as a general rule, he's probably going to be overdrafted in the wake of this news. So I'm more of on the don't believe it side, where I'm not necessarily sure the Edwin Uceta injury actually changes Griffin Jax's outlook. Maybe it, gives him less competition for saves, but I think a lot of fantasy players are looking at this as a Griffin Jax versus Edwin Uceta thing. And if Uceda's out the picture, Griffin Jax is just going to be the closer in Tampa Bay. And I don't actually think that's how it's going to work. I think this is going to be a very messy bullpen situation. Griffin Jax is quite good. Although he did struggle after getting to Tampa, I don't really have much concern about that. The peripherals were still fine. He still has elite strikeout stuff. But I just don't think the Rays are going to hand the closer job to any one person. If it's not Griffin Jax and Edwin Uceta, it's probably Griffin Jax and Garrett Clevenger. And there will probably be other guys involved in that mix as well. So, maybe I think you can draft Griffin Jax around 200th overall and hope for 20 saves and expect very good ratios, and he'll probably be a fine pick. But my concern with this is, as spring training goes on, we're going to start to see Griffin Jax really pushed up in like the 150 range of ADP, and that's where I'll definitely be out, because I don't think the path to 30 saves is as clear as a lot of people seem to think in the aftermath of the Uceta injury. Also, Uceta might be ready for opening day. Like, he has not been ruled out for opening day yet. It's worth noting.
Yeah. Over the past week, Griffin Jax's ADP at the NFBC is 185, but there is a min pick in there of 125. So some people are getting pretty excited about Griffin Jax. Next up, we know that Jordan Westburg is dealing with a partially torn UCL in his right elbow. He's out until at least May, could be longer than that. So believe it or not, Coby Mayo matters again for fantasy.
I absolutely believe this. Now, whether Coby Mayo will hit enough to actually matter for fantasy is a different question, but I think Coby Mayo, at the very least, is going to get a month of runway to prove himself, and that's something he hasn't really had. I guess in the second half of last season, he did get a pretty long look and was not very good. It was a sub 700 OPS. He had a great September, but even then, his average exit velocity was like 82 miles an hour in September, so there were real limitations to his skill set. But this is a guy who's been a top 20 prospect for a couple of years now, has been very productive at AAA. The range of outcomes has certainly shifted towards the bad end. You know, I think batting average is likely to be a concern for Coby Mayo. It's less of a guarantee that he's going to emerge as a 30-homer guy than it looked like maybe, this time a year ago or certainly a year and a half ago. But Mayo's going to get the opportunity. He's going to play pretty regularly to open the season. And there's a decent chance Jordan Westburg just never plays this season with, first an oblique injury to open spring training and then a torn UCL in his right arm that he's going to try to rehab. But we just saw Sebastian Walcott of the Texas Rangers, big-time prospect there. He's the Rangers, yeah.
Yep.
He just had internal brace procedure surgery and is likely to miss the entire season. So that is on the table for Jordan Westburg, or at least it's in the possible range of outcomes. So I think Coby Mayo is going to have the runway. It's kind of his last and best chance yet to actually emerge as an everyday player for the Orioles, but someone who should be in your late round plans at least.
Yeah, over the past 8 drafts at the NFBC, Coby Mayo's ADP is 464, but there is a min pick of 317. So some people, I think, are starting to consider taking him as one of their last picks in drafts.
Yeah, in that bench range for sure, Coby Mayo should be in that discussion.
All right, let's take a quick break. We'll be back right after this.
This is why we do this every March.
Major slam!
It is a basketball party.
It's March! Expect the unexpected!
Welcome back in, FBT Express, taking a look at some spring training storylines here. And next up, we learned that Oneil Cruz hired a left-handed batting practice pitcher this offseason in an effort to get more comfortable against lefties. He has terrible numbers against them in his career, but at least he's trying. So, Chris, believe it or not, Oneil Cruz will be better against lefties this season. You are muted, sir.
I definitely believe it. Because he had like a 400 OPS against lefties last season.
Yes.
It would be really hard to be worse than Oneil Cruz was last year against lefties.
Let's amend this to he will be serviceable against left-handed pitching.
I personally do not believe that. No. Now, okay, how are we defining serviceable? I think in 2024, it was like a 626 OPS against lefties, which is still really bad, but given that he should be closer to an 800 OPS against righties, you can look at it and see like, yeah, maybe maybe he bounces back and hits 240 and the left-handed splits don't drag him down quite as much. But I also think that the big risk for Oneil Cruz here is he gets off to a slow start against lefties. The Pirates are actually competitive and they just decide, you know what, this guy's not a starter against lefties. I think there's a real risk of that. So yes, I do believe he'll be better than he was last season. It would be almost impossible for him to be worse, but I still think he's going to struggle against lefties, and I think it's going to drag his overall numbers down. I'm much less willing to make the bet on Oneil Cruz as like a top 100 pick than most people are, and a big part of it is I just think there's real playing time risk there.
Yeah. Look, again, to his credit, he's trying to improve here against lefties. I've backed a little bit off the bus case for him. I like Marcell Ozuna being there and that kind of, veteran presence, another Dominican-born player where, he can relate and he's got that mentorship. So I'm just like slowly talking myself out of Oneil Cruz being a bust, but overall, I still don't love the price for him. Let's wrap up here with one more of those pesky Pirates. Konnor Griffin. Man, one day, 2 homers for Konnor Griffin. The first off of Ranger Suarez. Chris, we knew it would happen. We knew this would happen. The second home run, 111 miles per hour off the bat, 440 feet, just absolutely demolished the baseball. So, believe it or not, Konnor Griffin is a long shot for opening day.
So that's the quote from Don Kelly, right? That's what everybody over the last week or so was reacting to is Don Kelly, the new Pirates manager, saying, he's only played, I think it was 30 games above high A. It's really hard. The quote was something like, it's really hard to see him making that leap with the playing time he's had. Sure, yeah, it is really hard to see. We haven't seen a 19-year-old debut at the major league level as a hitter since Juan Soto. It's very rare. it's also very rare to be as good as Konnor Griffin was as a 19-year-old at AA last season. So we're already in rarefied air. It's rare. It's really hard. It's asking a lot for a 19-year-old to have a chance to make an opening day roster. He's already there, though. Like, that is, most 19-year-olds aren't even in the spot that Konnor Griffin already is in. And then I just look at the Pirates. Everybody's like, oh, the Pirates are cheap. They're gonna play the service time game. Well, you only have to look to 2 years ago at that blowing up in their face, because they played the service time games with Paul Skeens. They wait until May to call him up, and he still wins Rookie of the Year. And under the latest CBA, if a player wins Rookie of the Year, regardless of when they start their clock, their service time is the full year. And so what happens is the Pirates missed out on potential draft pick compensation by calling Paul Skeens up to start that season. And they didn't get the extra year of club control and the extra year of team control, of cheap control with Paul Skeens. And then last season, they tried to do the same thing with Bubba Chandler. He falls apart around June. We've got reports that Pirates players are calling Bubba Chandler to apologize on the team's behalf for not calling him up. I really do not think the Pirates can get away with leaving Konnor Griffin down if he looks ready. And I think that's the key thing. If Konnor Griffin flops this spring, he's not going to get called up either way. I think his fate is entirely in his hands. I do not think the Pirates are going to play the service time games with him, given how talented he is, given how much hype there is around him, and given that the clock is ticking on Paul Skeens' time in Pittsburgh. They have 4 more years of club control left, including this one, and he's going to be more expensive starting next year. Like, they might only have 3 years of Paul Skeens left before it becomes, we need to compete or trade this guy. They need to start competing this year. So I think Konnor Griffin, if he shows he's ready, I think there's very little chance he's not on the opening day roster. I'm kind of on an island on that one, but I can imagine the 2 home runs today might be swaying you to my side a little bit.
Chris, everything you just said is completely rational. I just don't believe that the Pirates are rational.
Sure. So I'm going out on a limb here. I'm giving them some unearned benefit of the doubt. For sure.
Look, I've seen split reactions. I've seen people on both sides of this on, fantasy baseball Twitter where, people are adamant one way or another that Konnor Griffin, yes, will be up on opening day. Some people believe there's no chance. He might not be up until August of this year. So,
I don't know. People be saying things so definitive. I think it depends,
yes. I would agree with that. And this is not how we should react to Konnor Griffin, but it almost feels like his draft price is going to go up or down on a daily basis, right? And it shouldn't be that way because,
not at all.
After the 2 home run game, he's going to shoot up a lot of draft boards. He could go 5 for his next 40 with a 35% strikeout rate and then have no chance of making the opening day roster. So I think there's going to be a lot of fluctuations in his price based on what he continues to do in spring training.
And look, reacting to a single good game would be a bad idea. Reacting to a single vague quote from his manager is also a bad idea. I think he's going to have to earn it. And maybe there's nothing he can do to earn a spot, but I really don't think that's the case. I think they're going to give him a real chance. And it might be a long shot. It might be asking too much of a 19-year-old, but he also might be the kind of 19-year-old who is capable of doing this. I will point out, the last 19-year-old to make their debut as a hitter was Juan Soto. He played 8 games at AA before getting called up. Now, that was mid-season, and he clearly showed that there was nothing left for him to learn, but Konnor Griffin played like 30 games at AA last season, dominated at all 3 levels, so there might not be anything left for him to learn, too. So I'm not reacting to the 2-homer game. I've been consistent in my stance on Konnor Griffin throughout.
You might not, but other people will.
But yes, I think a lot of people will. And we'll probably see there was a 5-day dip after that quote from Don Kelly. Now there will probably be a bump. I think as long as he's around 200, it's totally worth the risk because it's also a 19-year-old who just went 20-65. The upside here is just ridiculous.
Yeah, Connor Griffin's NFBC ADP over the past week is 187 with a min pick of 154 mixed in there. Again, I do think that's going to go up after this 2-home run game. For more extensive fantasy baseball coverage, listen to our full-length podcast, Fantasy Baseball Today, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or anywhere else podcasts are found. Thanks for listening to Fantasy Baseball Today Express, and we will be back again later this week. Bye-bye!